This time. Welcome everyone to this FSDR Summer Days seminar on dismantling capitalist development, a communist vision for well-being, which will draw upon the recent book, Capital Redefined, a communist value theory for liberating life. My name is Christopher Shagnon. I am a researcher, doctoral researcher in global development studies at the University of Helsinki and a vice member of the FSDR board. I am, and we all are, delighted to welcome our speaker, Dr. A Hamed Hosseini, currently a visiting fellow at the University of Jyväskylä. Dr. Hosseini is a scholar whose intellectual journey over the past 3 decades has contributed meaningfully to fields of critical development studies, global justice, and transformative social theory. Dr. Hosseini's academic path began in the early 1990s when he made a significant shift from electronics engineering to the social sciences. Motivated by a deep concern with the question of what progressive alternatives might emerge in the wake of the Cold War and the rise of global neoliberalism. This long-standing commitment to exploring post-capitalist futures has shaped the distinctive trajectory of his scholarship. After completing his PhD at the Australian National University in December 2006, where he introduced the concept of accommodative consciousness and the sociology of dissident knowledge, an integrative non-structuralist approach in relation to social justice, Hosseini went on to develop a body of work marked by both conceptual innovation and theoretical ambition. He is the author of Alternative Globalizations, 2010, Conscientious Sociology, 2013 in Persian, and Capital Redefined, 2024 with Barry K Gills. In addition to leading 2 edited collections on Transformative Global Studies, 2020, and The Dilemma of Pluriversal Transitions, 2025, as well as numerous contributions to debates on transversality, critical open-mindedness versus authoritarian populism, pluriversal politics, value theory, and the good life, as well as transformative global studies. At the University of Newcastle, Australia, Hamed has founded several initiatives, including the Alternative Futures Research Network, AFRN, the Well Living Lab, and Common Alternatives website. These reflect his commitment to collaborative inquiry and public scholarship. His current work focuses on 4 key areas: renewing critical development and globalization studies through transformative scholarship, critically engaging with the pluriverse debate and post-development theory, advancing a normative analytical approach to Marxist value theory, i.e. communist value theory, through what he calls an axiological turn, inspired by his broad notions of the commons and commoning. And 4, reimagining quality of life through the well-lived paradigm, a 16,000-word paper from 2023, as well as promotion of what he calls the communist impulse, an antidote to what he has coined compartmentality in his 20,000-word 2025 Globalizations Journal. What characterizes Hosseini's approach is a sustained effort to build bridges across traditions, empirically map and analyze networks of and cultivate dynamic solidarities among post-capitalist initiatives, and develop what he describes as communist frameworks for addressing the entangled socio-ecological crises of the unholy trinity of capital, coloniality, and modernity. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hosseini as he shares with us his ongoing work on transformative pathways towards livable futures.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for the very kind and generous introduction. I think that introduction raised already the bars very high for me. And first thing first, I'm very thankful to the FSDR and also the University of Helsinki for providing me with this opportunity. To be honest, this is the very first kind of book talk that I'm presenting, even if the book has it was published about more than a year ago, year and a half by now. But anyway, I had the opportunity, fortunately, to incorporate the book into one of the courses that I teach at the University of Newcastle. It's a third year undergrad course and quite advanced in theory. So that was kind of an opportunity for me, expanded over duration of a semester, to reflect back on the book and find lots of loopholes and problems and issues that you would like to, or I would like to incorporate in the next into the next editions, hopefully. And these conversations, wherever they happen and whenever they happen, they would be extremely helpful for every author, I believe. So I really look forward to having a good conversation. So I came up with a couple of scenarios when I was preparing for this presentation, and then I ended up writing in kind of a new article. And then I checked with Bonn and said, "Is that okay if I read that out?" And he said, "No, people expect you to talk, and so let's make it, a little bit more relaxed." So the slides would correspond to the writing of the new article, which is kind of my reflections year and a half later on the book, trying to engage with critical social theory, because the book is one of the perhaps shortcomings of the book is does not directly engage with the rest of critical social theory. It just goes on to the main objective of redefining capital through redefining value. So that is one of the things that must be done. So the slides might correspond to what I'm not going to actually present, just to make things a little bit less boring. Scenario number 2 is just to have a kind of hopefully a bit of a relaxed conversation about the book itself and the key arguments in it, and where do they come from, and what do they may mean. Although I should say that it's a short book, it's a 50,000 word document, and it's very condensed, very condensed, and to unfold that it would be very difficult and very abstract, as you might have already realized. With coming with lots of new kind of a reinventing kind of a terminology. Some of the old terms and concepts are being, I would say, in an ad hoc way, appropriated by us, by the authors, and the meanings have turned a little bit different. For instance, commons is maybe, it may sound too broad, and the rest of it. Yes, in terms of where the thoughts come from, it's very difficult. I mean, unfortunately, we couldn't reach out to Barry, right? And we haven't heard back from him. We hope that he is doing well wherever he is. Unfortunately, we're not having Barry with us. So what I'm presenting is, of course, are my thoughts. And so if there's any shortcomings or any problems or issues or contradictions, they are all mine. Yes, in terms of the background, it's very difficult for me to pinpoint any specific time in the past where the idea behind the book started. Different elements of it started in different ages in the past, and as you mentioned, Chris, my PhD was I started it at Australian National University 2001, end of 2001, early 2002. Until 2006, when I was graduated, and the topic was on global justice movement, or the so-called anti-globalization movement. And those days, if you may remember, many of us very much, especially in political economics, political sociology, economic sociology, development studies, we're very busy talking and thinking about globalization. If it is a new thing or old thing, if it is happening or not happening, the political aspects of it, all different dimensions of it, globalization from above, globalization from below, and when we wanted to become, perhaps critical enough, we were talking about neoliberalism. So neoliberalism was the currency of the day, and it is still amazingly is. But I was feeling there is something missing, really something really missing. The elephant in the room is not seems to be not being well comprehended. Until after my graduations, I attended a seminar, for instance, just as an example, at the University of Technology, Sydney, and a colleague and a friend was presenting something on globalism, again, market globalism, globalization, and those sort of things. It was just maybe a couple of months or a couple of weeks maybe before the global financial crisis, the depth of it become publicly well known and announced, and those sort of things. And in that speech, I don't think I could hear the C word, capitalism, which was it was the moment the penny dropped, and and I said, well, how about capitalism? And the answer, if I remember correctly, was that old-fashioned Marxist concept. And so it was people were quite perhaps uncomfortable. Not everyone, I guess I would say, many of us not comfortable to talk about it until the GFC happened, and then the C word was back to the conversation. And with that, of course, came all the old disputes and the different opinions about what the heck capital or capitalism is, and how we're going to comprehend that. Not that people were not there. Of course, there were people like Hart and Nagby and others talking about capitalism, but they were in the margins maybe, and then with the wars that happened in 2003 and beyond, and the attentions were directed towards anti-war movements and etc. etc. So they were not at the center of attention, and even a lot of people who were already talking about capital and capitalism were thinking of it as something that has become so essentially changed. The elephant, even those who could see the elephant, many of us couldn't see the elephant in the room, but those who could see the elephant, they were seeing it as a different elephant than the elephant that Karl Marx in 19th century was seeing. And okay, so then this was something in my mind. And of course, studying alternative globalizations and alternatives to globalizations and the global justice movement, studying alternatives to capitalism became a big subject for me that I have started to pursue. But the more I pursued that, and the more I found many interesting ideas popping up all over the places, from the local to global, global south, global north, all different. And then later on, the indigenous living well together from the global south, the degrowth became a big buzz in the global north, etc., etc. Still, I didn't. Well, these are beautiful ideas, and in many places they're put to practice maybe. And also I made connections with organizations that were involved, like for instance, New Economy Network Australia, NINA. We together established Alternative Futures Research Network and Research Hub at the University of Newcastle until the university decided to end them. So then I realized, and part of my work was just to map the networks of all these goodies. What I was realizing, or what I was seeing, was that these are very good ideas, but they're not very strongly connected to a proper analysis of capitalism. They are happening in the context of capitalism expanding its tentacles all over the places, right? So I remember one of the activists was I was in communication with in below their signature in the emails had this idea. I think it comes from an architect that says, if you want to transform a system, just roughly speaking, I'm just paraphrasing. If we want to transform a system, try to make an alternative to it so good that the system would look obsolete. And what would be better than this? You don't need to really confront the system, and you can avoid the confrontation by making it look obsolete. And then that reminded me of what the kind of a syndrome that Marx detected in the 19th century when he started to talk about, utopian socialism and what's wrong with them. I mean, he and Engels praised them. I mean, but also they picked up on their problems that were not really related to a proper analysis of capitalism and class conflicts and etc. Just trying to open up a niche somewhere in order to exercise, which is good. I mean, but Marx and Engels were not against that. But then where is the connection? And how that can actually, I mean, at least if you want to start from a kind of a normative position to pursue an ideal and put it to practice, you still need to understand what sort of obstacles you're going to face, as a result of the systemic resistances and impediments, etc. So this bifurcation, when the C word is coming back and then people start talking about it, and there are two types of lines of disagreement about what capitalism is. One is very much analytical of old disputes about what capital is. Is that a thing, or is like what Thomas Piketty is doing or saying, or is that a process? Is that social relations or not? Is that all about economic and wage labor and market and private ownership, or is that more than that, and it expands to the society, community, communal relations, ecological relations, political relations, etc. So these are the, I would say, call them the analytic, the disputes around how to analyze capital and what's the nature of capital, etc. Or if you're delusion, you may say it's fine to talk about nature of something even. So anyway, and then in another line of disagreements is as among those who actually try to pursue the alternatives to capitalism. And then so you see this bifurcation is happening between those who are trying to take a normative position and try to make sense of capitalism by actually talking about its alternatives. So capitalism is what alternatives are not, and alternatives are the ones that capitalism is not. And if you take that position, again, as I said before, you still need to end up doing some analysis in order to make sense of how your alternatives are going to be implemented in the context that is so rigid and so resistant to it. And if you take the analytical position and you want to make sense of capitalism, you finally need to end up actually. So what I'm going to come up with, what I'm going to extract, what I'm going to conclude out of the analysis of capitalism, I'm not going just to criticize it and highlight the contradictions, and then what then. So the normative side would be the loophole. Now the book again joins the rising momentum or the movement of bringing capitalism or C-word to the center of the to discussions, but it's not capital centered. I know as reader you could quickly realize that actually the book quickly moves on to say that we need to actually to redefine capitalism, to comprehend capital or capitalism in 21st century. We need to actually try to make sense of what value is and redefine value, because value is seen as what constitutes capital, or as Marxists like David Harvey would say, capitalism, value in motion. And this is what Marx was also paying attention to, trying to come up with a, of course, he didn't invent the value theory, but trying to tackle and engage with the value theories of his own time, and trying to come up with his own value theory according to some interpretation. So the book tries to make an argument about why it is necessary to reflect on capital and redefine it, and then it tries to make a case in order to say, okay, this would actually takes us into a conversation around the issue of value. To substantiate that, it tries to actually come up with a number of arguments in order to make the case. As soon as you start talking about value, something comes to, I think, everyone's mind. That when we start talking about value, it's about valuing, right? It's what could be, I mean, what could be more value laden than the concept of value. But you quickly realize that a lot of discussions about value theory, which comes from Marxian orthodoxy, tries to deal with value as something objective, something that is the subject of kind of a scientific analysis. And it could be seen as a problem for Marx, or it could be justified as since for instance, Marx was trying to start the conversation from when it started, from physiocrats, and then later on Adam Smith and David Ricardo and their bourgeois perception of value. And so he took that concept of value as an objective concept, as something that is not value laden. He took it for granted. And so he wanted to show that if I accept this presumption, if I follow this, this argumentation, where we're going to get, and here are the contradictions, here are the problems, etc., etc. It would be one of the reasons, or it could be the reason that well, actually, it is the way that capitalism treats value as something objective and reductionist. So you can say that Marx was reductionist because capital, the subject of, or capitalism, the subject of his study was reductionist. But whatever justifications we go for it, or you just blame him for being reductionist, I think we all agree that he was talking about commodity value that is actually materialized, the social labor being materialized in commodity, and then capitalist value, and not about any other value. And it's a very interesting quote I found somewhere, that Engels, I think it's in, Engels in Anti-Düring says Marx was the first to, and that was actually kind of shocking, it was, it actually questions our understanding of what Marx was saying. Marx was the first to demonstrate that under capital, labor can have no value. And this means, intrinsic value, because its labor is reduced to, is abstracted. And he tries to explain, because labor is abstracted, it is stripped of its own creative power. Somewhere else, actually, it's very interesting. I really invite everyone to read Marx's critique of Gotha program. And interestingly, at the beginning, he questions one of the statements in the Gotha program, and that that says, labor is the source of all wealth and culture, and Marx says no, actually, nature is also a source, as much as labor is. And he actually questions the attribution of value, in an exclusive way to labor, by saying that this is a bourgeois thing. This is a bourgeois thing to attribute a mystical, and these are the words, you know, falsely assign you're attributing supernatural creative power to labor. And so he says this is a bourgeois thing. Why bourgeoisie does that? Why capitalism does that? Because they want to disconnect labor from nature, and then say, okay, goes all of the ultimate source of value is labor, and therefore nature is just, you know, just kind of a free gift, no source of value. And then of course then they, by disconnecting the labor from nature, and both in practice and in of course in perception, they try to actually say, okay, who owns the means of production that normally comes from nature, have the right to own the process, to control the process and the product, and not the labor. Labor just gets its share in the form of wage. But also they see themselves as laborers. You know, they also value their own labor, the capitalists, and they, of course, they make sure that it's well paid. Okay, so yeah, so as soon as we start thinking about value, then we have to grapple with this dilemma. Should we treat value the way, you know, in an objective way, the way that Marx did, or should we attribute some value from the communal point of view, from the ecological point of view, from a point of view that sits outside capital or capitalism or not? And what are the consequences of each one of these? And it seems that the literature is very much divided between the two. Now, well, one of the ways actually that the book tries, in the book we try to actually make a case is, you know, as you may remember, Marx and Engels were thinking of, you know, their interpretation of the history of humanity was that, you know, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. And in, you know, and then mention a number of examples throughout the history of up until their own time, that is between the employers and employee, etc., so between the capitalists and the working class. And then in Mariano Mazzucato's words, we can say the history of hitherto societies is the history of the struggles between, just in nutshell, value makers and value takers. But as soon as you say this, you're actually highlighting something which is at the core of many societies, that conflict over, you know, how the value that is produced is going to be distributed. And it's a very Ricardian kind of conception of value, being, you know, obsessed with the injustices of the distribution of the value, of the value produced. But there's something else into this that is not picked up in that you know, phrase from the Communist Manifesto, which I have tried to I don't know, how can I move that? Which I have tried to express it in this way. So it's not just about the conflicts over, you know, between the value makers and value takers over how the value is distributed. The history of all hitherto existing societies, and by extension the henceforth ones, is the history of two separate yet overlapping ideal types of the struggle. One is between the value makers and value takers, which is picked up in what Marx and Engels say, within the dominant value regime over the distribution of value, and the other, a more decisive one, over what ought to constitute value. You know, who and how dictates what should be valued. So if you actually only pay attention to the first type of struggles, you are actually buying into the system's definition of value. So whatever the value is, the question is how it's being distributed, and that's an interesting thing, that you can actually continue this bifurcation. And then the second part is that you pay attention to, you know, who defines it, how it is defined, from what point of view, in whose interest. So can't we define value in a different way, for instance? And that's the bifurcation that you can also see among, for instance, as you could see in chapter 6 of the book, that we cover three strands of argumentations. One around the ecological aspect, and then especially among the ecological Marxists. Or the other one is among the social reproduction theories. You can see they are divided too. Also, the theories around, the mutations in capitalism under new technologies. They are also kind of, you can see they are also bifurcated or divided. Divided between two groups. One group says, well, considering that capitalism has essentially changed, and labor is no longer the major or central source of key source of value production or value, and a lot of things have become socialized and ecologized, etc., etc. And capitalism functions way beyond commodifications through finances and rents, etc., etc. Then therefore we should abandon the value theory. Value theory is kind of an obsolete. And then, so they try to stick to what Marx defined as value, but they don't find any reason why they should continue that line of theorization of value. Not that capitalism has muted into has a mutations into something quite different to the past. The good thing about them that by doing that, at least they're not going to suffer from what is called flat ontology. Because the other strand suffers from that, and the other strand says, no, actually, we have to bring the value theory back, but we need to actually expand that the definition of value beyond labor into all sorts of other things that can be the source of value. But by doing that, they are divided between the ones that see value as something positive. For instance, the more liberal versions of social reproduction theories would argue that, okay, the reproductive labor is also a source of domestic labor, affective labor. They're all sources of value, and they contribute to the production of surplus value. So women, for instance, since this is very highly gendered and racialized, that women should be compensated. That's it. But it could also be seen as something, value could be seen as something very, very negative. And then how actually, and I'm talking, of course, of Jason W. Moore, that again, that's an expansion of value theory to ecology, but again, collapsing everything into ecology and everything, trying to overcome that dualism of nature versus nurture, or nature versus society. So you see that each way of this, this argumentations you take, it has its own problem. And that has been a kind of a big dilemma. And the question in my mind has been to how we can overcome this dilemma. The dilemma between, for instance, Mariano Mazzucato's very analytical and kind of reformist understanding of value. She buys into the definition of value under capitalism. The question is how actually to redistribute it, and then of course, social democratic reforms is the answer, but and state regulations, etc., etc., if I remember correctly. But that's one side of the dispute. And the other side of the dispute, for instance, well, she's one of the people that tries to bring value theory back. She wrote The Value of Everything, the book The Value of Everything. But also on the other side, this is the analytical one, and the other side, the normative one, you can refer to David Graeber's book towards an anthropological value theory, something like that, if I remember correctly. And again, he looks into the indigenous and cultures, etc., etc., and trying to take a normative position, and so this dualism between the analytical and the normative. But he doesn't come up with a very proper, a strong assessment and analysis of capitalism itself. So again, it's it's what you expect of anarchists to do, of course, to pursue an alternative to capitalist value by looking into non-capitalist ways of living. So how we can actually square these two? Is it possible to come up with a theory that is both analytical and normative, or not? And again, the other dispute, the other bifurcation, should we expand the definition of value? If we expand the definition of value and attribute value equally to labor, nature, culture, community, political movements, etc., activism, etc. So then how are we going to overcome the flattening of ontology, to that you treat everything as if it's all equally of the same substance? Labor is of the same substance or essence as nature is, for instance. And then they talk about the work of nature, the work of labor, as if they are the same type of work. And if you don't want to expand the definition of value and just want to stick to labor, then how are you going to deal with the role that nature, the so-called nature plays, or the so-called culture plays, or the so-called community plays? And then, of course, if you're Nancy Fraser, you would say, okay, all those non-labor things, there are the background, necessary conditions for capitalism to extract value out of labor. And then, Nancy Fraser says, no, if Marx's job was to show the hidden abode behind the, market exchanges, to show that, where value comes from the exploitation of labor, my job is to show the abode behind Marx's abode, which is, the social reproduction, colonization, racialization, communities, ecological expropriations, etc. So yes, the book tries to see if it is possible to have to develop a theory that is both normative and analytical, a theory that can expand the definition of value to beyond labor, but tries to avoid the problem of flat ontology or monism and reductionism. So so it comes with a number of ideas. Number one is that yes, it is possible to, of course, to do this, and this is just an attempt to do this. I mean, it can go scandalous, and everybody would say no, this is not going to work, or it may open up some new line of conversation. Let's see what happens. But yeah, so the answer is affirmative. But then to do that, it comes up with the idea, okay, what if we just differentiate between two types of value? The value that capital or capitalism produces, we can't deny that because it's shaping and reshaping our relationships. You can't just throw it out of window because you don't like it. And then we call it fetish value, fake value, for a number of interesting reasons that I would explain later if you have time. And then, so differentiate between what capitalism produces under the title of value, but we call it fetish value, and then the other types of value that is we call true value. Now, true value is it, and of course this is the normative aspect of it. True value is any quality or activity that results in the flourishing of life, planetary life, communal life, local life. And of course, it's not something that is a kind of a blueprint universal thing. It's a concept that refers to what societies autonomously and collaboratively and collectively come up, their own. But we call it true value because it anchors the normativity to what is the most precious. No one can really deny. I mean, unless you're suicidal or something. or come from a very special cult that praises death or something. That comes from the value of life, something that is under a huge threat, especially these days. So that's the differential. So let's make a difference between true value and fetish value, and not to conflate the two under one title, something that a lot of theories actually are suffering from. And then so that's one step to take. And then to overcome the issue of the problem of flat ontology while expanding the definition of value, we need to pay attention. As soon as you talk about value, you start thinking about the sources of value. What is the ultimate source of value? Okay, with true value or fetish value, what are the sources? And then the Marxian perspective, or following Adam Smith and the rest of classics, would say it's for instance labor, or you can also add nature and other things. But but I thought maybe let's take a moment and think about what we exactly mean by source. What is source when we say source of something? And I thought maybe that can be referred to the issue of cause, the cause of something. We're actually talking about cause of something. And I'm not talking about cause and effect, the associations between one event and another event. I'm talking about the causes that are the fundamental causes that give being or essence to something. Mostly appear in the form of transitional processes, and this is something that actually picked up by and very well theorized by very simple terms, although it's more complex than you think, by Aristotle, the four causes, the doctrine of four causes, the material cause, the efficient cause, the formal cause, and the final cause. And then if you look at that, it seems that it can give us some hope in terms of actually the fact that Aristotle doesn't, although he considers a hierarchy among them, and I don't want to get into that discussion and make it more complex, but he considers them as indispensable, irreducible types of causation. And then if that is, say they are ontologically different, the formal cause, the efficient cause, the material cause, and the final cause are ontologically different. And if we actually adopt that as our framework, it seems that it can help us to make a better sense of it, especially if we want to expand the definition of value from labor to nature, land, communal relations or society, social relations, ecological relations, political relations. You don't conflate them. You don't treat them as if they are of the same nature. Because the Aristotelian doctrine of four causality or causation doesn't allow you to do that. So think of a house, think of a building. It is made of some materials. You just pile up bricks and things, stuff. They're not going to turn themselves into a building. So it also needs a form. It also needs a structure that comes from the ideas of those who build it. So there is a material cause, which is the stuff. I'm trying to simplify it for those who don't know about this. And then then your efficient cause are the workers, the people who get involved into building that house, the agency, the mover, as you may say, and then of course the formal cause, the plan, needs to be well designed, so you don't put the windows on the, I don't know, on the floor or something, and then the final cause, the function that it has, and it's a problematic thing for perhaps Aristotle, but the final cause is, the house gives us protection and warmth and whatever it's built for, and it's I don't want to get into the discussion about the problem of teleology of accepting the final cause as the cause. But it can be, the book argues that it can be resolved. by taking an evolutionary perspective, you can resolve that matter. Because the final cause is the outcome, right? But how can outcome can cause the how can the, for instance, the effect cause the cause? You need to take a time frame, evolutionary perspective to see, for instance, that through the evolutions in the natural cases, the fish that doesn't look like a fish would be eliminated. So that's the way that the body of the fish functions, determines finally what type of fish can survive, for instance, etc., etc. When it comes to the human artifacts, of course, we humans don't build houses just one off forever. We constantly learn how things can go wrong, and then we reflect back, and etc., etc. And the same with the society. Society seems to be functioning between the natural and the artificial ones. So you see that, and that's so. In order to, so the book argues that we can overcome that problem if we take an evolutionary perspective and also consider the possibility or the capacity of humans to critically reflect and think of different ways of doing things and bettering things, doing things better. And this is called alterity. Now, when we want to think of how value is produced, if you think of only labor as the ultimate source, so you're only thinking of the efficient cost, right? The efficient, the labor, that agency of human. But which is under capitalism, agency is gone, of course, and labor turns into the material and becomes part of the material, becomes part of the capital, but how about the other sources of value? Where if you think of the material cause, you can refer to the so-called nature, to the ecological substances or substantial aspect of value production. If you think of the way work is organized, society is organized, economy is organized, the markets, etc., under capitalism, that is also another source of value, capitalist value, which is actually the formal cause. It gives form to the way capitalist value is produced. And then the final cause is, of course, accumulation of wealth, profit motive, the value itself, the fetish value itself, that you want to make more of that, more and more of that. So it's a closed system because it constantly tries to produce what is meant to produce, and everything else is instrumentalized for that production. But so this is the way the fetish value is produced, and so you can see that we have 4 types of causes or sources of value that we can actually talk about and think about and bring into our analysis without collapsing them into each other. And so you can avoid flat ontology. On the true value side of the story, again, you can think of the efficient, the material, but you need to. So the book actually makes an argument that in the true value should be based on a kind of a perception of commons. Some sort. It's an idea that is inspired by the idea of commons. So it doesn't just treat commons in an institutional display, or as a pool of resources, etc., etc. It considers life as a commons. It considers every ecological system as a commons. The estate, markets, everything, everything functional can be seen as commons, as far as the output is something that results in the flourishing and sustainability of the commons and commoning activities in that system. So you think of an indigenous way of living. You think of an ecosystem, a forestry, for instance. I'm just trying to draw lessons out of it, more concrete things. But commons can be also immaterial, for instance. digital, for instance. And then in these situations, everybody's contributing something to the system, to the commons, and they also benefit from the commons, but they benefit from it to the extent that the boundaries, the limitations are not transgressed, they're not crossed. So the commons is able to continue and flourish. So it's quite a complex thing, and I know the book does not, as our friend Franklin picked up in his critical review of the book, it doesn't engage with the theories of commons. Perhaps by taking in a kind of an odd position, it would be a little bit difficult to do that, but it would be also something that I look forward in future. So now we've got true value, we've got fetish value, and then how they're connected to each other. The book comes up with this idea that actually, if you want to connect this, I mean, well, the true value and the commoning basis, the commons basis of true value gives us the normative aspect. It relates to the normative aspect of the theory, and this is kind of open-ended. It's not something that it's something that can be explored through democratic conversations and decision making, etc., etc. Because if it doesn't, it would undermine the principles of commons. It's not possible to have a commons that is hierarchical and dictatorial, etc., etc. So it's a kind of an open-ended thing, normativity, I would say. And then on the other side of this, you've got the fetish value. And these two things do not belong to different universes, one happening somewhere else, and the other one happening somewhere else. They're actually capital from this perspective is in just one single term, just one single word is decommunization. When that, so the sources of true value do exist. The fact that they are suppressed, that doesn't mean that this normativity is just an ideal. It's in our just minds. We're not thinking of the true value as a category that exists somewhere separate from the capitalist society. When we look after each other, when we go on a strike, when we show solidarity, it can also happen within capitalism. So we think of true value and its commoning sources as a spectrum, That there are some places, for instance, deep, I don't know, in the Amazons, an indigenous society could be perhaps the strongest examples of it, maybe. But also there are many elements of that. And in fact, the commoning sources of true value are the host. I mean, it is impossible for capitalism, and that's why how real this true value is. It is impossible for capitalism, because capitalism is seen in this book as a parasite, for the parasite to live on without the existence of the host. And this parasite is a little bit different to the parasites we know. It has the ability of transforming the host to its own parasite. It is, in fact, the product of this transformation itself. It's like a cancer, the cells of the body themselves turn, go through a mutation. So while Marx, and as he acknowledges at the end of his volume 3, that the scope of his work is to explain or explore the inner organization of capitalism in its average form. The center of his attention is actually the inner organization, and inside this inner organization, when the value transform itself, it's a change in the form of the value from, for instance, labor to commodity through the production relations, then to money, etc., and then to other types of other forms of value. So capital is value in motion and transformation. So what Marx is actually trying to explain is the ways that capital changes its form, or value changes, capitalist value changes its form. But here as soon as we bring true value into the equation, we're not dealing with not transformation but transmutation. So it's a change in the essence, it's the change in the substance that our communal solidarity, that if they happen outside, in a kind of in a commons-like situation, would result in everybody's flourishing and creates harmony, etc., etc. When under capital, it transforms into market relations, competitions, and you see that a type of reification and abstraction happens, not to the labor, but also to the community, but also to land and the other ecological resources. They all go through this, transmutation. So creativity. So that's why labor for Marx is not a positive thing. It's not a good thing, actually. And for us too, it's not a good thing. So the source of labor is actually is human and more than human, because we can't isolate human from the more than human, from the rest of nature, is actually creative power, or what we call it creativity. So in a communist way of living, in a communist status of living, what we have is human and more than human creativity. But under capitalism, this turns into labor, and labor becomes, the alienated form of creativity. Was Marx aware of this? He was, but he didn't have the terminology. So it's very interesting that in one of his parts of his book, he talks, and I quoted him in the book. First, to consider labor, we need to first to consider labor independent of any social formation process, as a process between man and nature. Man, through his actions, mediates, regulates, and controls metabolism between himself and nature. You see, he is talking about creativity. He's talking about what we call in the book the creative power. He differentiates between labor when it's outside the capitalist social formation. But he knows, and it's a problem for him, because he knows that it's impossible to talk about labor in an ahistorical way. You must have seen somewhere that kind of social formation that results in a balance, a metabolic balance between man and nature. And he actually, later on, you see in his ethnographical notes, he talks, he refers to and studies, the way that the production of value happens in indigenous societies, free societies of America, even medieval farmers, farmers during the medieval ages. They also the Asians. The society, right? The commune of the Paris, right? So these are examples that actually he has in mind and studies. So yeah, he does differentiate between the two, but he doesn't come up with a theory that tells us, how that is transmuted to as a source of true value to a source of fetish value. Think of what we call nature is actually under the communist state of living is actually, we call it livability. The common sources of livability that will become transmuted into what we call nature or land, and then become reified and fetishized and appropriated. So then you may ask how these transmutations happen, and then you can talk about conviviality as the source of as human and more than human solidarity that becomes competition, corporate rivalries, etc., etc., and alterity as the final cause that becomes the market conformity and the production of the accumulation of wealth and fetish value. So you see that now we have expanded our definition of value, and you see that we consider on one side, and these are of course again, it shouldn't be seen as kind of a a new dualism, replacing old dualism. But because we see this, as a kind of a spectrum, we see this as, Weberian ideal types, and the fact that they are very much intertwined. But this is just to analytically simplify things. You see that the sources of the common sources of creativity become decommunized into labor, and this is the subject of Marxian theory. When according to Marx, you want to study the inner organizations of productive capital, and then and through abstraction, as Marx says, it turns into commodity value. But then you also have livability that turns into nature, conviviality that turns into social reproductive relations, alterity that turns into political organizations of capitalism, and all together they produce what we call capitalist value. But then there is fetish value. Fetish value is still different to capitalist value. Fetish value considers the loss of all these potentials. When we think of crises have two aspects to them. One, the destructive aspect of them, the things that are lost. Okay. The second aspect are that we normally forget, and that actually becomes the subject of normative thinking, is this, if this crisis, we didn't have this crisis, what potential opportunities are lost? What other potentialities are lost under this crisis that we could actually result in better living? So we always think of the point zero as if everything is kind of considered normal, and then now it gets worse and we call it crisis. But what if this crisis was not there and we were on the positive side of the spectrum, where we could actually altogether produce true value? So the loss of those common sources of true value would result in fetish value. So fetish value is true value minus, arithmetically speaking, minus capitalist value. And that's why fetish value is always negative. You see, amazing things happening under capitalism, for instance, new technologies, new cities, urban developments, etc., etc. But you see that you don't see the other side when the ecology is collapsing, and they're not just collapsing and the problems, but in fact there were the opportunities, there were the sources that would result in production of the true value. We don't take that production of true value into account when we talk about capitalist value. So that loss is what actually makes fetish value different to capitalist value, and always in deficit, as we have seen historically throughout the history of capitalism. Okay, get the signals that I should shut up, and then I hope I haven't made you more confused, or I hope that I have made you more interested. And if there is any confusion, I hope that you can you will find enough time and energy to take a look at the book, and I hope that you would never deprive me and Barry of your thoughts and comments, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, really fascinating, so much food for thought. I read most of the book last year, but it's been a while, so it's nice to catch into these things, but also so rich, and like because of the time and everything, like dense. I mean, I feel like I need a food break almost, like, after a feast. But we have some wonderful commentators here. Please, I will introduce everyone. I'm going to give some brief reflections. So first, please welcome Associate Professor Sabaheta Ramchilovich Suominen, who is an Associate Professor and Academy of Finland Research Fellow based at the Natural Resources Institute of Finland, aka Luke, or Lykke, where she is also a docent in global environmental justice. She is the PI of the Justice and Politics and Global Bioeconomy Project, and currently a vice board member of the FSDR. We are also very pleased to welcome Professor Franklin Obeng Odum, who is Professor of Global Development Studies here at University of Helsinki and leads the Global South research at the Helsinki Institute of Sustainability Science, HELSIS. He is co-PI on the project Forging Sustainability Science and HELSIS for societal change. He is also a fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's a prolific author, and he's written quite a bit about commons. This is not his most recent book, but he did publish the book Commons in the Age of Uncertainty, Decolonizing Nature, Economy, and Society. And he is a former chair of the FSDR. And last but definitely not least, we are very pleased to welcome Dr. Bonn Juego, who is a senior lecturer in international development studies at the University of Jyväskylä. He is the lead researcher for the cluster of on governance in the Southeast Asia region in the project Islamic Public Value Theory, Theology, and Practice of Indigenous Cooperative Government Institutions. And he is currently the chair of the FSDR board. So thank you so much and welcome to all of our excellent commentators.
Where is the camera again?
Oh, it's here on the left.
Okay, oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Hamed. Redefining capital in ways that go beyond interpretation to action has always been a formidable challenge. The magnitude of this task becomes evident when we consider past efforts at doing so. Karl Marx dedicated 3 volumes to the job. I only the bad could only. I mean, I could fit only volume 1.
Yes.
2 more of these, and this was followed in more recent times by Thomas Piketty producing a trilogy of his own. In the case of Hosseini and Gills, they developed a groundbreaking work in only 123 pages. So how is this possible? Blaise Pascal famously remarked, and I quote, "I have only made this letter longer because I have not had the time to make it shorter." This book stands out for its brevity. It's a testament of the author's meticulous effort in distilling the core issues. It is an embodiment of the adage, brevity is the sole word. To ensure that this succinct narrative remains engaging, I'm eager to explore the author's clear and insightful reasoning behind their choices. As a trained and licensed valuer myself, although my certification with the Australian Property Institute expired a few months ago, I was curious to see engagement with modern methods of valuation, the Paris valuation and investment tables, or debates on international valuation standards. Yet it seems the book sidesteps those who specialize in valuing life. My question is, what do we gain or lose by discussing value without the valuers? As I was following your presentation today, I was scrupulously going through the bibliography. I couldn't see any valuers listed there. So that's my first question.
And what valuers you mean?
Those who are trained as valuers, they make a living by valuing. And they have organizations around the world. They have international organizations that produce standards of valuation. But these people aren't engaged at all in your book, in your theory. So that's question 1. A.M. Babu notes that Walter Rodney's theory of how Europe underdeveloped Africa implies that we've been asking the wrong questions and calls for an end to the blame game encapsulated in the tautology, we are poor because we are poor. What practical insights does the communist value theory offer for advancing research and practice in global development studies? We do have colleagues who are doing research right here in this room, and it would be good for you to reflect a little bit on some practical implications of this new theory. Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach famously states, and I quote, "Philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it," unquote. With your development of a communist value theory, a pivotal step towards liberating life, what are your next moves? If you are forming a political party or a movement, please give me a membership card right now. It's Sabbath 10. Should I stay here? I move?
Yeah, she's online.
Okay.
Bonn, just let me know how do you want to proceed, right?
We can't hear you, so.
I was just asking, how do you want to
okay.
how do you want me to proceed? Do you want that the first question is answered, or can I ask mine, or how do you?
No, we have to go through all the comments now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Good. Thank you so much. I have a few questions, but some of them overlap. I'll try to make it short. So I should mention that I am not as much familiar with the orthodox original works of Marx, and haven't read definitely the 3 volumes of Capital. I have come across his work with more like the those who like Nancy, for instance, Nancy Fraser's work, or those who have tried to expand the Marxist approach, either from feminist perspective of others. And while reading through the book pages over the past few days, I have been especially zooming and been interested in the practical implications of this otherwise really excellent conceptual work and synthesis that you have provided in the book. So I've taken note of various important implications for the polycrisis, for the post-capitalist futures. You have discussed, for instance, the alternative metrics beyond the GDP, the Commons approach, post-capitalist alternatives, pluriverse, a lot of the important debates that are also explored in various other disciplines, like degrowth, post-development, feminism, for instance, the care aspects there, or decoloniality, and so on. So I was wondering, how would you frame the book's main contributions and implications of this theoretical work for the contemporary issues? I mean, in what ways would you say that this theoretical development advances or perhaps surpass the existing theory praxis emerging from degrowth, post-development, decoloniality, ecofeminism, and others? So that would be the first question. May I follow for the second? Or okay, I guess yes. Then also quite relatedly to that, are there any empirical examples that you could point to as to help the reader think about the modular framework that you just presented, or the fetish versus true value, how they would play in the real world if you could suggest, for instance, if you would have been asked to by some institutions or NGOs or ministries to kind of how if they would ask you to advise them how to apply true value in place of GDP or market valuation. So any kind of practical or empirical aspects would be beneficial. And also I was wondering, like, to what extent would this differ from the frameworks like the Buen Vivir or feminist budgeting or some other alternative metrics like what was that, GPI or and the last one was just about this value discussion that we heard from Hamed. I was thinking, and this is maybe provocative, and this is something that all of us, it's maybe unfair to ask this question also, because all of us who are working in between the pluralist and relationalist, non-dualist approaches, and then standing in our very much Eurocentric foundation and traditions, being Foucauldian, be it Marxist or any others, like we get kind of stuck, or we maybe run the potential risk of absorbing this other onto epistemologies within the Eurocentric dualist onto-epistemic framing. So while I was listening about the value, I was thinking, like, what if we just say, why are we so value? What if we said going beyond the value, rather than, for instance, doing the binary, expanding or not the value definition? Because like the normative approach to value that you presented, it's somehow like in my, maybe I'm so like, I don't know, just provocatively, it's sort of, we risk to subsume a lot, the more than human life, the relations, the creativity, all of the, really foundational life things under the Eurocentric and modernist term of value. So yeah, that would be all. Thank you.
Just to make a better sense of your third question. So your third question is that concentration on value is something Eurocentric, and then if you go beyond value, it would be non-Euro or post-Eurocentric. Is that what you're?
I'm not sure, but I mean, often when I work with non-dualist and relationalist thing, I'm thinking, like, how do we work, how we make sure that our work doesn't flatten or appropriate indigenous spiritual and otherwise other onto epistemologies. Like, we are working with those traditions that are where, for instance, value is not at all, and they are not concerned primarily with value, and maybe some of them may even reject the concept and idea of value, but we are so grounded. We want to talk about, let's say in my case, I'm so interested in power analysis or this analysis. So I don't know. Yeah, I was wondering whether you see the risk. I'm not sure myself, but how do you see this risk? Whether we are taking the risk?
Yeah, that's a very, very legitimate, very good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. In the interest of time, probably because I'll be hosting, and I'm also the host of Hamed.
You can have one.
Yeah, I can have one. So yeah, perhaps thank you very much for the insightful presentation, and of course, congratulations on the book. First, for an author, perhaps have you had second thoughts about after having published the book? Would you have titled the book differently? Because now there's this debate about, there has been critique that it's too normative. Where's the analytical paper? Yeah. So it could be value redefined or redefining value, because each different ways you frame it, you would also suggest whether it's a normative or analytical take.
Yeah.
Of course, your subtitle is okay. Secondly, maybe we could move to more analytical one. The specificity of value in terms of the diversity created by time and space. So what is the communist theories conception of time and space. For example, recently we had a guest, Ali Kadri, talking about the accumulation of waste through wars. Capitalist value is being created by or through life shortening policies and strategies. For example, it's a temporal sense of value. Like, capitalists make money and profit by shortening the time of human beings, including nature. So even austerity policies would lead to the shortening of life and also deaths through wars. So conception of time and space.
So he's practically providing me with the example that Saraheta wanted me to provide.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, and so going back to the normative criticism, that's. But you also had this stance on your philosophy of science based on critical realism. How do you extend that to the analysis of the materiality of capitalist social relations of production?
You say that.
Yeah, that's the critical realism that you are also saying or writing in your book, extend to the analysis of the materiality of capitalist social relations of production. So perhaps also related to Sabrina's, concrete objective conditions. And then thirdly, or even maybe fourth now, comment.
We were supposed to have one.
Yeah, so it's about because Barry is your co-author on the question of agency. Barry is so strong about where's the agency. And are we talking about here so-called communist movements? And then the idea of recommunization, for the hardline left-wing comrades, they would view it more like a reformist. And then they would ask you about, where's class struggle there, especially that if you have defined that capital also as a class and social relation. And if you talk about indigenous epistemologies and global South epistemologies, there's always this tendency of idealizing, the community. Are we idealizing them, or romanticizing, considering the after effects of post-colonialism and combined with the universalization of the capitalist logic and ethos. And then maybe your training, going back to your training, you're trained in mathematics and in numbers. Have you thought about numbers? Maybe related to Franklin's question about those
So this
who
is
are
the
in
fifth one.
Yeah, the last now.
Okay, so this is
Yeah. So do you have a quantified valuation of the commons? Have you thought about now? So yeah, I still have some, but I think I'll stop there.
okay. Is that all?
And there are more, but then the others would like to speak as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Should I move somewhere or?
Say, have you read the book?
Do you want to sit here in front of?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Oh, the microphone is over
The camera is already here.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so everybody can hear me? Yeah, I think these are, very big questions. And they're actually giving me a lot of.
Sorry.
Yeah, a lot of things to think carefully about. Yeah, they're very important questions. Now, let me start with Franklin. No, you're right, Franklin. The book doesn't engage with values, and that's you're right. I mean, we can think of different examples of it, but and the book, as you know, it's a very abstract, short piece of writing. Talking about values without engaging with the valuers. But it's about giving voice to the valuers, and not just the valuers that have established institutions and organizations and registered and et cetera, within the capitalist or around the capitalist system. But also every individual living being is a valuer. We constantly value and assess things in order to get heads around, you know, if this is a good thing to do, or this is a bad thing to do, if something is going to be a good thing, or is it a bad thing, what are the consequences? So we are all valuers in the most general sense of the term. But yeah, I mean, that would be interesting. And one of the projects that I'm trying to pursue, although with the lack of grants and money, you know, the fetish value, it is very slow, is to start writing a collection of the essays. And in each essay, I would be trying to apply the theory on different contexts. And of course, if it is possible to communicate with people involved, I mean, to interview them as so, you know, this kind of job requires, you know, funded research projects, although it could be also self-funded. I mean, normally most of the things that we do is out of love, and that's not, you know, the system doesn't support it, especially if it sounds too weird. So yeah, I mean, that's a very good point, and thank you so much for raising that. So what would be the consequences or the outcomes of this for people in development studies was the second question. I think it is asking us to rethink everything fundamentally different from a different point of view. And I know everything is not about value and valuing, but getting it right, or getting it to at least in a way that is more I would say effective and helpful, to the extent that the book tries to make the case for it, is what I'm hoping for. So then the people in development studies would first thing first think of, you know, how we can actually in development studies again integrate between our analysis, our analytical approaches, and the normative approach. How we can create not just a dialogue between the two sides, although that dialogue is certainly essential, but also to produce theoretical frameworks that bring the two sides into an equation, although that would be a very difficult one. But we would like, I mean, think of yourself, for instance, you're applying for a job, or you're going for a promotion, or you're at the top of a director of an organization and want to actually improve things, you know, under the routine, you know, kind of a routine example. We always benchmark ourselves, and in benchmarking, you know, is a kind of a normative thing to do, because we're not yet there, but we want to be there. And so when we do such things, you know, as something normal, even in life, you know, you don't need to be the head of an organization or go for a promotion. Again, benchmarking constantly happens in our, you know, subconscious, maybe even, or sometimes subconscious level. You know, in terms of, you know, improving our personal health or communal health, etc., etc. What I can do better, you know, in terms of raising my children, etc., etc. So these are all normative, constantly involved, you know. And I have a motto. It may sound a little bit too weird, but I say the truth is more real than the real, and that corresponds to what is attributed to Che Guevara, that be realistic, and then he says demand the impossible. To be realistic, demand the impossible. So this book at least invites the reader, whether from development studies, you know, economic sociology, whatever, to actually be brave and think of, you know, the dualisms, the bifurcations, things that divide us, you know, things that results in not very satisfactory, completely satisfactory, or adequately, I should say, adequately satisfactory ways of theorizing and practicing, or creating praxis, and try to overcome those dilemmas. So just to be brave is the message. I mean, whether this is a it has been successfully substantiated or not. It's at least it's an invite. And yes. So in terms of the next move for practice, I think that's an important question. This is not kind of a blueprint that would advocate for a particular type of political praxis. It is more into the job of, as you read chapter 3, which we tried to establish the meta-theoretical foundations of communist value theory. We say that we're standing at the meta-theoretical. We talk about infra processes. So it is about, bringing all those practices into conversation, into creating a platform, an analytical and theoretical platform, where the practices that pursue some sort of ideal or normativity would found some place to actually communicate with those of us that are more involved in understanding the system and changing the system from within. So it tries to overcome that. Again, if we can, if this can successfully provide us with that platform, that platform can be a platform where the reform and transform, the reform and revolution can find some common basis. So the reform can still be pursued when it paves the way and make things better for the revolution to happen, and the revolution can be the force to push for more reform. So they can actually find, and that's this communist value theory actually tries to provide that. I mean, this is again goes back all the way to my attempts to find ways where diversity and solidarity can come together. If you look at a lot of my publications, you come across with terms or terminologies like accommodative consciousness that I kind of tried to discover among the global justice movements. How this different, what kind of consciousness exists that paves the way for the feminists to talk with the unionist, with an environmentalist, etc., etc. And this was captured under the title of accommodative consciousness. And then later on, I moved on to adopt the concept of transversality, which is not that I coined, but I adopted it and tried to use it a little bit differently. And again, this transversality or transversalism is about that you don't need to dilute your identity, but you can actually accommodate the other into your praxis and ideology. And then now communism and commoning. I think I'm finding some sort of maybe a better base for this agenda of creating unity across diversity. So that's sorry if I'm still talking a little bit too abstract, but yes, and I think it relates to Sabaneto's questions. So I think about how this would correspond to, for instance, the movements like degrowth or feminist movements. I think again, this is not. I mean, this is the problem. I actually, when we talk about communism, the ism at the end implies that we're dealing with an ideology. But communism here actually sits at the what I call meta ideology. It again, it's about creating a platform for different. So if you look at each one of those, I don't know if I can get back to the slides. If you look at one of these, for instance, creativity, it corresponds to labor movements, the movements that want to reclaim labor and free labor. If you think of, consider livability strongly corresponds to environmentalist movements. ecocentric movements. If you think, if you consider conviviality as strongly corresponds to feminist movements, anti-racist movements, anti-colonial movements, etc., etc. If you think of alterity, it corresponds to perhaps liberation theology, a spiritual revival, critical pedagogies, and those sort of movements. So you see that the multidimensionality of considering the sources of value, that they do not actually they do not collapse to one another. It creates a base for the recognition of each one of these types of movements without actually without reducing them to each other. That there are different pieces of the same puzzle, and that puzzle is about not only reversing the process of decommunization, that we may call it recommunization, but also it can be originated, creating new commons, establishing new commons. And the book tries to explain some of this. There's a number of figures here. For instance, you see would also talk about the opposition to this, the recommunization infra processes and communizing infra processes, that as in the opposite direction of what capitalism does. But we also consider the fact that the relationship is not just a dualistic relationship. Capitalism is actually capable of well, let me get back to the first one. It seems that okay. Capitalism also has civilizing meta mechanisms. So these are the ones that, for instance, the progressive and as could be regressive regulations and reforms through social political institutions, state funding, public and corporate welfare, elite civil society actions, co-optation, I should say, of grassroots movements, on challenging coexistence with post-capital alternatives. So capitalism has the capacity and ability to actually incorporate and co-opt lots of forces of resistance. It is capable of adopting even and adapting new languages, sustainability, for instance, and dilute it and water it down and incorporate it into its agenda. So this relationship is not kind of a dualistic, oppositional one. And true value, although can be produced through reform and within the capitalism, but capitalist system, but still it can be again incorporated back in order to sustain the life of the system, unless it results in the emergence of new commons or recommunization. Otherwise, that would be incorporated into the system in order to sustain itself, to civilize itself. So the concept of civilization is negative here. Self-civilizing processes that capitalism has to have. Well, I think I'm leaving a lot of questions unanswered, as Bonn says. Yeah, I think my perhaps easiest way of answering them all together is that yes, they are all absolutely relevant. Thank you so much for sharing them with me, and they give me, of course, more energy and incentive to go well beyond this very really little and shaky steps that have been taken in this book. And I really appreciate your help with in this regard, and also the time that you spend reading and thinking and making these beautiful comments. I'm really obliged. Thank you so much, and all the best.